But before we dive in, I would like to say just a very brief word about the fourth floor. For those of you who don't know and who are not members, the fourth floor is a market network getting more women onto boards and cap tables of companies of all sizes, including startups. And we're doing this as a way to initiate or advance for-profit board careers for women, and also help women entrepreneurs access funding and growth opportunities. And women founders do that at the fourth floor in a couple of ways. One, by leveraging their advisory and their governing boards, and also in our backroom investment club. So if you're interested in learning more, so maybe you are currently a member of the fourth floor, but you're interested in learning more about what's going on in this investment club, you can find that out in the platform or just reach out to us. We're happy to talk to you about it at more length. If you are not part of the fourth floor, but any of this sounds interesting to you because you're a founder or you are a woman interested in launching a for-profit board career or investing, then please consider applying to join us. I know we'll drop the link in the chat. We also have a platform tour scheduled every Monday from 2 to 2:30, so you can always sign up, join, get a sneak peek inside, see how the platform operates, what the community is like. So we encourage you to do that. And also, if you're a member or not a member, you might want to sign up for a board boot camp. We do them periodically. The next one is in June. It's a great way to just get an overview of how everything works, whether you're approaching it from the founder perspective or from the board candidate investor perspective. So either way, encourage you to sign up and do it. And then, and one thing, if you are an entrepreneur, to join, it is only $1 as long as you are participating in the board seat exchange, meaning that you're allocating at least one opportunity into our digital board seat exchange. Can be a mentor sponsorship, so only $1. And then the very last thing I'm going to say is about our Pay It Forward initiative. We'll also put some information in the chat about this. This is something that we just kicked off earlier this year, and it's essentially an incentive framework that it encourages all companies, whether they're small startups or they're big companies like Coca-Cola, to participate in the Pay It Forward initiative. It helps them take tangible steps to bring diversity into their boardroom. They earn credits. There's lots of other benefits for them. So it's good for the company, and it's really good for us because the part of this framework is that they nominate women who become lifelong board candidates at the fourth floor, and they also use our board seat exchange as a way for them to post these open board roles and bring diverse women into the boardroom. So if you are interested in nominating your employer, or you know of other companies out there that might be progressive, or even if they're not progressive, that might want to benefit from this framework, please let us know, and we would love to get in touch with them. So we're trying to sign up companies right now, and we have a big goal to advance 75,000 for-profit board careers for women by the end of 2025, which we think will really help to close the gender wealth and funding gap by diversifying boardrooms and cap tables. So more information in the chat about that if you're interested. But now I will stop talking about the fourth floor and enough about me and enough about the fourth floor. Let's get to the point of why we are all here today. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Erin Gleason, to welcome you up here to the stage with me so that you can tell all of us about how we can learn why and how mindfulness can be an ideal tool when it comes to negotiations. So I'm definitely really fascinated to hear all about this myself as a lawyer. So welcome, Erin.
Thank you, Breen, and thanks, Kat, too. And I just want to say quickly, I think I joined the fourth floor a few years ago, and was in on all of the initial pilots, and it has participated in, I think, what was maybe the first board boot camp. And it has just been amazing to be on this journey with you all and to see all of the success that you've achieved. And I'm definitely humbled to be here today. So thank you very much for having me. And thanks to everybody in the room who has joined in for our conversation today. So, I am, let's see, we've got our slides up, so I'm just going to start. So yeah, I'm Erin Gleason. I founded Take Charge Negotiations, really to facilitate conversations like the one that we're having today. Usually I do it in corporate training programs or consulting, But it's an honor to sort of pop in here and to chat with all of you about, maybe a different way of thinking about negotiation than what we usually do. I'm also a mediator and an arbitrator. So in that capacity, I really help companies of all sizes, in the Fortune 100 range or even early stage startups, to put problems behind them. And this is everything from contract disputes to insurance coverage, disagreements between partners and founders. I mainly live in the commercial realm. But today, that's not something we're going to talk about. And I was thinking about the presentation today, and I think it's particularly helpful to be here right now, as May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And as we continue to wind our way through this pandemic, and as Kat and I were talking up at the top of the hour, there just have been study after study about the impact that all of this has on each of us individually. And whether that's stress or anxiety or depression that stems from job loss, or maybe on the flip side, mounting job responsibilities that are just nearly impossible or seems to be impossible to meet, and also the impact that quarantine has had on all of us. As we've studied the impact that this has had on so many people, scientists have also found that the introduction of mindfulness practices into our daily lives can go a long way towards counteracting COVID's, negative impact on our mental health. So today, we're actually going to talk about more, focus in on mindfulness and how that works in the negotiation context. Okay, let's see if I can move my screen. Okay, so just quickly in the chat, if you don't mind, tell me how often you think you negotiate. How often is this something that comes up for you in your life? Is it something that you see, like on a daily basis, every now and then, or it's not something that you really pay attention to? Okay, so we have daily. Good. That's the correct answer. So I have this Canva thing, and it seems that my slide navigation of Canva has not been so great, so bear with me. Here we go. Got it. Okay. So yeah, from sort of the mundane to significant events and decisions, negotiation is something that happens every day. And when you become more mindful of the negotiations that you have every day, regardless of whether they're happening at the kitchen table or in a boardroom, you gain more clarity on your particular negotiation style, your strengths, and the places where you'd like to learn more about yourself and your approach to these types of conversations. And really, that's why I created Take Charge in the first place. So over the course of the next hour or 45 minutes or so, we'll talk about, what mindfulness can mean for us. And we'll look at it in negotiation and perhaps, maybe redefining what negotiation is. And then merging these two concepts together and to talk about how you can do that in your day-to-day negotiations and why that's helpful. So specifically, we'll review how to incorporate techniques from mindfulness as you prepare in advance for negotiation. And then we'll also run through a series of techniques that are useful when you're already seated at the negotiation table. So about 5 years or so ago, I started to become kind of obsessed with the way that women are taught about negotiation and all of the messages surrounding us, telling us what we are doing in the negotiation context. And most of it is wrong, right? So if you Google women in negotiation, the results are pretty depressing. So women don't negotiate, or when we do it wrong. We negotiate with the wrong people at the wrong time. We use the wrong tone of voice. It's just wrong. So I decided to start a new conversation. So a negotiation learning experience grounded in mindfulness and positivity. Because when we communicate with one another, especially in the context of a dispute, it's really healthier and more productive if we have those conversations from a place of calm and confidence and just, plainly feeling comfortable in our own skin. Yeah. So tell me, what are some of the most important skills that you think a mediator should, or not a mediator, a negotiator should possess? What are the most important negotiation skills for a person to cultivate or to have? Yeah, listening is huge, and we'll get to that later on in the program. Giving and getting, yeah, the exchange is the big one, right? Being curious, yeah, empathy, patience is 100%, yeah, looking for a win-win. Yeah, no, this is great. The thing is, when it comes to negotiation, I think, it's not about cultivating some elusive or exclusive skill set. It's about being you, right? And communicating in a way that makes you feel good and getting the results that you deserve, right? Slide, move. There we go. All right. No, we're not there yet. So now tell me what comes to mind when you hear the word mindfulness. And if you were paying attention to my little screen mishap there, you'll have a sense as to where I was coming from. But when you hear this word mindfulness, what do you think of? The picture. Yeah, peace, stillness, presence. Yep. Being present, being in the moment. Yeah. Okay. No, not yet. Yeah, here we are. Okay. So for a long time, right, this mindfulness word was, all of the words that you all just used were certainly not, excuse me, I'm coming off. I'm going to mute myself for just a second, sorry. This is like my 10th cold of the year, which is why we rescheduled the last one. And I knew we couldn't do it again, but hopefully the voice will hold out for you all. Okay, sorry. For a long time, this word mindfulness, was something that really brought out sort of a physical repulsion for me. It was just this sense of, whatever. I don't sit still. I can do yoga, but you're moving and you have to concentrate so you don't fall over and break your arm, right? I cannot sit down for an hour and not, itch my nose if it's itchy. Like, these are not things that happen in my world. This was never something that was of any interest to me. So like many people, I found mindfulness the hard way. I got sick. So, years ago, there was a possibility that I had ovarian cancer. And this is the moment when you're sort of running around New York City, interviewing oncologists, where the rest of the world around me just sort of stopped. And thankfully, I'm very grateful that, for me, it all ended up being benign. But it was really a moment where I had to kind of stop what I was doing. And I felt like I had been given kind of a reprieve and a chance to sort of look at my life and to question my priorities. So I was always one of those people who felt that, anxiety is a good thing, right? It kept me on my edge. I was sharp and inquisitive if I felt a little bit nervous. But on reflection, these things were really detracting from the quality of my life, and I needed to find a way to better manage them. So I started meditating. Now, how many meditators do we have in the room today? On a regular basis. So, regular, however you define it. Daily, weekly, when you need it. Yeah. Or lately, right? Yeah. it was really hard for me at first. I could do it for a few minutes, but it was not easy. As I continued to develop the practice, it kind of dawned on me at some point that these heavy emotions that come up for us are really those that we often struggle with at the negotiation table, right? So this is anger, frustration, impatience, anxiety, fear, self-doubt. These are completely normal feelings for people to experience in the context of a negotiation. But isn't the conversation better when you're able to identify those emotions coming up and then learn to manage them and focus on what's really important, right? Which is the conversation that you're having. Okay, so this is my definition of mindfulness. The practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of complete awareness of your thoughts, emotions, and experiences on a moment-to-moment basis. And I sort of came to this definition based upon lots of reading and research that I've done over the past 3 years, just trying to understand different schools of thought when it comes to mindfulness and sort of what are the most sensible and relatable mindfulness practices for people who are negotiators. So much of the teaching around mindfulness, as you all suggested in the chat, relates to an awareness of your emotions as you're experiencing them, right? Being present, learning to refrain from overly reactive responses to what's going on around you, and then just getting back to your reality, right? And often in the context of a negotiation, mindfulness involves keeping our stronger emotions in check, right? So we certainly negotiate over simple things all the time, right? Even with ourselves and without any kind of an emotional impact, right? So should I have pizza for dinner or pasta, or should I really have salad? Do I put the dishes away or fold the laundry? These are all mini negotiations that are going on all the time, right? But the types of negotiation that we're really focused on today are those conversations that are of bigger consequence, or at least they're perceived that way. So in negotiation, when you perceive that the stakes are high, the stronger emotions are those that we really need to take care to observe and to know how to release, right? So anger is not a bad thing necessarily, so long as it's channeled in a way that's productive, right? Anxiety is going to come up in life. We're human beings. It's how you react to it that can make a real difference. So if we're to condense my rather lengthy explanation of mindfulness to a shorter version, it's what you all said, right? It's just being present, not getting bogged down in how maddening or anxiety-inducing a situation might be. Not planning what you're going to say next, or wondering if the person who's sitting across from you could be more obnoxious, or thinking about, what's going to happen later that day. It's really being focused on what's unfolding before you at that moment. And this is why mindfulness is really the key for success in negotiation. All right. So what do you think? Why do people negotiate? Why does this even need to happen? Why does this come up? I mean, most of you said that, you see negotiation on a daily basis. Why? I know this is a little trickier one, right? This is a deep questions as we get further in. It's a form of communication, absolutely. Make a bigger pie, yeah. Better outcomes, yeah. Yeah, influence is huge, yeah. So that when you find yourself in a negotiation, and whether it's on behalf of a client, it's with coworkers, or it's even at home, something needs to change, right? And for years, negotiation theory has taught us, and somebody put this in the chat, I think it was Dan, that negotiation is, it needs to be a win-win proposition. But in practice, that can be hard, right? So here's our working definition of mindfulness incorporated into the negotiation process. And here, what I've tried to do is to focus not on the problem part of it, but on the opportunity, while also reinforcing that the act of conferring with another person or people, in this instance, is of mutual benefit, right? requiring that you stay present in the conversation, not just physically in your chair or your little Zoom box, right? But in your head. And all of this is done while refraining from any kind of judgment about the other people that you're sitting with, about yourself, or even the negotiation process itself. So in any negotiation, as in life, take a drink. It's important to experience a range of emotions over the course of the discussion, right? So in the beginning of the conversation, you might feel anxiety-ridden, or as if you're operating under an unfair power differential. But maybe that changes as things go on, right? You know, you might feel angry later on, or you might feel optimistic, depending on how the conversation takes you. People often enter into negotiations with this sense of optimism, but then, you know, that can really devolve quickly when things don't go as they had planned, or the realities of their situation or their case sort of come crashing down around them. And here the negotiation can start on a positive note, but then get derailed later on by impatience or insecurity or, you know, even rage. You know, there's nothing wrong with experiencing any of these things again. We're humans, we get mad and frustrated and happy. The real question is whether you're able to recognize the emotion you're experiencing in the negotiation, whether it's actually helping you, and then most likely letting it go. So I tell you about, you know, all this emotional stuff because if you're cognizant of these things, it can really help to strategize for negotiation. Practicing mindfulness can also help you to understand the impact that your emotions have on your decision-making ability. And when you're able to recognize these things coming up for you, whether it's anger or frustration or optimism or contentment, you know, whatever it is, it's not only for your own benefit, but it's for the benefit of the conversation and the other people, and sort of looking for an ideal outcome to that conversation ultimately. So how do we go about recognizing these emotions, right? And then what do we do with them? So we'll talk first about how to use this concept of mindfulness in preparing for the negotiation. And then after that, we'll talk about some ways to be more mindful around the actual negotiation table. So the way that I see it, negotiation typically has 5 phases, right? So first you make a plan. Setting yourself up for a meaningful and productive negotiation requires a fair amount of pre-work. As this is largely a solitary endeavor, or at least one conducted, you know, within your own team with people that you trust, is an ideal place to start incorporating mindfulness into the negotiation. And we'll talk more about this in a minute. After the planning is where you meet with the other people, right? And this is where you share your perspective and listen to theirs, right? It's your opportunity to communicate your view of the issue with the other people and to explain why, you know, you're taking that position. But it's also on the flip side where you need to listen to the other people that you're in the conversation with and to take in that information that's being shared with you. So from here, you know, once everybody has contributed to the conversation, you know, there's some bargaining involved, and this is why we're there after all, right? It's a give and take part where you revisit your perspective, maybe even shift it after you've learned from what other people have to say, and look for some sort of common ground between you. Now, often in this process, there is some kind of an impasse that'll arise that needs to be overcome. So it's common to find issues that are particularly divisive in negotiation, and where an open mind and an ability to remember this mindfulness stuff can really go a long way in helping to overcome obstacles. So ultimately, the negotiation concludes and we go on with our lives. But as we'll talk about a little bit later, it's also important to review, you know, what you learned about yourself and your approach to the negotiation after each session in order to continue to grow in your negotiation skills and strategies in the future, you we all have room for growth always, and it's really important, I think, to be able to reflect on these things afterwards. So to me, with very few exceptions, all of these stages are needed in a negotiation process. And perhaps it's a bit more fluid than I've sort of segmented out here, but nonetheless, these are important facets of any negotiation. Now, there's one critical component here that gets overlooked the most. So can you guess which part, which of these elements is the, I think, most overlooked part of the negotiation process? You put it in the chat. Plan, sharing perspectives, okay. Yeah, it's the plan. People, sort of either don't realize the importance of making a plan or don't know that it is actually a part of the process, I think. So going back to our definition of mindful negotiation for a second, right? It's the practice of conferring with another person to derive some mutual benefit. You can't achieve that if your preparation centers only on your position or your client's position, right? So if you don't take a step back and think about the people you're negotiating with, their perspectives, their interests, you're operating from a disadvantage. And people do this all of the time. I mean, my job is to facilitate negotiations. I'm a mediator. People walk in without ever having thought about what the perspectives are of the other people around the table all of the time. Planning is also important because it gives you an opportunity to create a template or a roadmap for the discussion. Now, understanding that this is a fluid process, but taking this action before you actually start talking can be a real exercise in grounding. It helps you to clarify what you want to achieve, gives you the space to sort of think about how you might do that well in advance of any, in-person or video conferencing interaction. This is also a great exercise in helping to build up confidence before you ever go into the conversation. So what do I think needs to go into a negotiation plan? So this is your game plan. It needs to outline your goals for the discussion, the outcomes that you would like to achieve, and the ideas or strategies that you have to, sort of accomplish these goals. How are you going to introduce these things, and how are you going to talk about it with the other people that you're engaged with? When I mediate, I usually ask the parties who I'm working with to come to the mediation with a template settlement in hand, right? So this doesn't need to be anything formal, but really an outline of what they hope to accomplish at the mediation. Each party is asked to do this with the understanding that, their list is not going to be the list, right? So the other people who are participating in this conversation have their own lists, and the goal is to kind of try to bring them all together so that we'll have one end product at the end of the day. Writing out objectives or goals or intentions before the negotiation ever happens really forces people to define with clarity what they're working towards, knowing that the final outcome is going to probably look a bit different because other people's goals are not going to be the same, right? That's the point of the negotiation. But this is really meant to serve as a guidepost for the people who are negotiating, right? So you know what you're working towards from the outset. Negotiation is much more likely to be a successful and a positive experience if you know with as much specificity as possible why you're there and what you want to accomplish. So while outlining the goals that you have for the negotiation is important, it's also important to have a clear understanding as to why, right? So I've seen many negotiations devolve into a number swap, right, way too early. Not knowing sort of why you're working towards a specific settlement figure, or being able to explain it or have any kind of a principled negotiation around that number, right? So outlining your goals for the negotiation along with the reasons why these things are important will in turn help you to understand how to prioritize, what you're looking for, and it'll set you up for a better way of presenting your position more clearly once you're all together. understanding whether any emotion influences your decisions throughout this process is important, right? So decisions that are made from a place of fear or anger are rarely good ones. And outlining what you want from this discussion and why and in what order and so forth, it's important to be cognizant of the fact that this process can also bring up some strong emotions and ask whether those emotions are sort of healthy responses here and if it's helping you, right? I mean, I think takes a bit of practice, but if you have a natural curiosity and interest, which I assume you do if you're still here, then it comes to you, right? And if you ask yourself, what am I feeling right now as you're planning for a negotiation? And if the answer is not what you expected or what you think serves you, then it's important to take a break and to find somebody to talk to and to do something else and come back when you feel like you're ready. So once your goals and priorities are in place, it's time to think about, the other person who will be participating in this negotiation with you. It's time to sort of turn the tables and revisit the path that we just made, only this time in someone else's shoes. So just as you outlined what you hope to achieve from the negotiation, you should do that for the other people that you'll be meeting with as well. Anticipating their goals and priorities will help you to better prepare for the sharing and the perspectives and the bargaining and overcoming impasse that lies ahead. So in doing this part of the exercise, do you uncover any new strengths or weaknesses in their position? Are there any issues with regards to the balance of power between you? More on this in a few minutes. And this process may very well be enhanced or hindered by how well you know the other person. And, I don't want you to sort of overthink it, but do your best with the information that you have available to you. Once you feel comfortable that you have an understanding of their likely negotiation goals and a general understanding of how they might prioritize these things, move on to their reaction for your plans, right? So what are potential areas of agreement, or what are the possibilities for discord that you can identify? Notice what, if anything, right, is making you uncomfortable about this process. And what feelings are coming up? Does this process feed your confidence, or does it heighten your concerns? And can you notice without judgment and learn to let the negativity go? I think that visualization is a really powerful tool in the negotiation space. And there's so much science behind this, and I find it to be so fascinating. So during the last Summer Olympics, scientists studied the training patterns of 4 different groups of athletes. So group 1 did all physical training, 100% physical training, right? Group 2 spent 75% of their time preparing for the Olympics in physical training, and then 25% of their time was spent in mental training. Group 3 split their time in half their time physical training, half their time, in mental preparations. And then the last group spent 25% of their time in physical training for the Olympics. So all the time that they are getting ready for the Olympics, 25% of that time is in physical training, 75% of the time is in mental training. So who did the best? Could you tell from the voice inflection? So it was group 4. The people who spent 75% of their time visualizing their success were the people who brought home the gold. Another study, which is equally fascinating, and I have to tell you, I've given sort of this presentation or presentations similar to it a bunch of times, and I've known about this study and sort of the outcome of it for years. And it only dawned on me this morning when I was reading through my notes that I need to do this. So this is at the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, and they instructed volunteers to imagine flexing their biceps as hard as they possibly could, right? So there's no actual bicep flexing happening at all. You're just thinking about those biceps and thinking about flexing them. And after doing this for a few weeks, subjects had a 13.5% increase in strength, which is amazing, and especially for me, because I never have time to go to the gym. So scientific research increasingly demonstrates the benefits that visualization can have on one's performance. So whether that's in the pool, on the ski slopes, on set, or in a boardroom. So I think it's just an amazing technique and something that can really go a long way in the negotiation space. So what is it? It is the process of sort of conditioning your brain. And this is how it can work in the negotiation space. So first, you just get a really clear picture of your goal. Now, in the context of negotiation, you could do this in a variety of ways. You might choose to visualize actually the planning process, the beginning part, right? And remaining open to new ideas, developing an approach that, will help you to achieve your desired outcome. You could also visualize, how the sort of sharing and bargaining parts of the negotiation transpire in a way that leads you to your desired outcome. And then another way to do it is to really focus on the end game. So hone in on that final stage of the negotiation when all is said and done and you are walking away and you have achieved everything that you wanted to. Once you've decided on where you want to place your focus, imagine every detail of that as vividly as your imagination will allow. You can write this out, you can meditate on it, whatever works for you. What's important here is also to feel it, okay? So to imagine the emotions that you want to experience in that situation and to live it out in your brain. And then to do this repeatedly, whatever that means for you. If it's every morning, if it's twice a day, whatever you feel comfortable with, but really try it. I mean, there's certainly nothing to lose. Now, I was going to say we could try it here, and I have a meditation, but I think we probably don't have time. So that was just a little preview of Bermuda, which is a place that I like to think of when I'm meditating. But you can go to my website. So I have a bunch of free meditations. There's one to help people to sort of visualize the negotiation as part of the planning process. And then there's also a meditation, which is for, in the middle of a vexing conversation to help to bring you back down, to calm you down if it's a negotiation that's, taken a sort of a negative path. Okay. So now let's move on to the actual, interchange, right? So the next part of the presentation includes tips on the following negotiation strategies. So first we'll talk about listening, which I know came up in the chat. Active and reflective listening techniques can really help you to stay present and focused in the negotiations. The use of silence at the negotiation table also, I think, is a great way to keep people grounded and sane in really trying times in these conversations, which often happens. We'll also address the issue of power imbalances in negotiation. How to recognize real versus perceived power imbalances, and ideas for addressing issues of real concern. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about how to reflect on all of this after the deal is done and how to learn from your experience. Okay, so when we finally get to the negotiation table, and whether this is face to face in the same room or in a Zoom context, the first thing that often happens is we share our perspective, right? But before we get to sort of making presentations, let's talk about the importance of listening to what other people have to say. Listening during negotiations, I think, can be a real challenge, especially when you're in a situation where there are inflammatory statements being made, you feel that half-truths are being told, or maybe horrifying surprises are being revealed before you. In these instances, it is pretty normal for the strong emotions to pop in and to take over, right? So frustration with the incompetence of the people that you are forced to talk to, anger over the arrogance that surrounds you in this room, anxiety over bad news that has been received. So when these things jump in, we often stop listening, and instead we go into this, this sort of what if, what am I going to say next vortex. So the person who is sitting across from you is maybe still talking, but you are now long gone, planning your clever retorts, or you're just too angry to listen to anything, right? Maybe you didn't see these problems coming, or you feel like now you're really in trouble and not sure how to deal with it. And it's normal at this point to start spinning. I definitely have been there. So what do? When this happens, it's important to recognize that it's happening, right? Because this is not a place from which you want to make decisions. You're in a compromised position at that point. So by tuning out, right, in these moments where this sort of trying situation unfolds, the offensive information is being revealed. By tuning out, you're not only losing key information, you're not reading the other person, and you're possibly showing them that you're not paying attention. And all of these things are going to feed into the worsening of the conversation. It's really helpful to be able to recognize, to be mindful, right, of these types of emotions arising for you in real time. So we have no control over the people who we negotiate with, right? So they're going to arrive at this conversation with their own agenda and their own tactics. You have to remain mindful of your reactions to them. That's the one thing that you do have control over, right? Remain focused and as collaborative as possible. So when another person makes negative statements, not judging them, utilizing sort of reflective listening or active listening techniques to see if you can either reframe their statement to one that's more positive or just move on from there. So just by way of background quickly, active listening requires that you maintain eye contact, right? Refrain from letting your brain run off with sort of next steps or comebacks or whatever. And really pay attention to what's being said and stopping yourself from overly reacting in the moment, right? Which is really helpful. Active listening is a practice in mindfulness in and of itself, right? Keeps you in the present moment with all of the distractions turned off. Now, this is particularly helpful in negotiation because it encourages the other people to keep talking, right? And this is a good thing, even if you don't necessarily like what they're saying most of the time. It shows them, that you're interested in what they have to say, perhaps makes them feel more at ease with the process. And all of this can greatly contribute in the long run to creating and developing a rapport, creating an environment that's conducive to generating solutions, right? So despite the fact that you may be in a conversation where you don't necessarily like the people or the exchange, going back to what we talked about originally, there's a problem, right? There's a shared problem that needs to be solved. And so that needs to remain the primary focus of the endeavor for you. All right. So silence. People often love to talk, and so I think it's important to let them. Silence is one of the most effective negotiation skills to cultivate. And just let me say, put a pin right here. I certainly recognize the importance of, getting your perspective across. And I'm not suggesting that, an ideal negotiation strategy is one where you spend all of your time listening and being silent. I think it's really important to share your perspective. But I think that what I've learned in myself and sort of identifying ways to to be more sort of thoughtful and mindful about the way I communicate when a dispute has arisen. It's really important for me to sort of slow down and to learn to sort of take information in. I know that, you know, I will always have my time to share my perspective, but being able to sort of pace yourself and to signal to the other people that this is, you know, an exchange that's important. I do think that the listening and then also being quiet are important techniques to consider. We'll get to some others in a minute. You know, the silence bit is hard, I think, for me, as you may have noticed, despite the voice problems. I've been talking nonstop for about 45 minutes here, and you know, this is not much different from most days in life. Right, but then I stop talking and it's weird, right? So there's that little like 5 seconds of silence. It's like, what happened to that woman? Silence feels weird, and I think that's why it works in negotiation. Now, first, it gets you out of your comfort zone and into some quiet for a few minutes. Now, odds are that the person who's sitting across from you is going to feel sort of weird about this too. And it's often sort of amazing what people will say to fill that void when you sort of insert a moment of silence. So, you know, we're not required to fill every moment of the discussion with talk, right? And this is especially important to remember in those moments where you've checked in with yourself and you recognize that your emotions are running high. You know, just be quiet for a minute, ask a question, and let them answer it and digest it. You know, silence can give you space to breathe, you know, to calm down, to refocus, to lose your cool, or to regain your cool, and also to get more information so that, you know, if you're in one of those moments where you recognize that the stress is up, that this is not a moment where, you know, I really want to spend that much time sharing my perspective. Instead, ask a question and let them continue to share theirs. That gives you more information and potentially more leverage down the road. So power imbalances, whether real or perceived, can be a real distractor to our success in negotiation. So what happens if the other people don't play fair? Or if you are missing critical information? Or perhaps, you know, the issue before you is a lot bigger than you realized, or the divide between you is much wider than you knew. So while there are intractable people and discussions, I think there's usually a way through the fog. So it takes perseverance, and I think it takes practice, but it's often sort of putting fear aside and trying new things and listening to your gut. So when you feel like the decks are stacked against you, right? You don't feel like you have as much power, the discussion is faltering. There are several ways to reclaim your power and to get the negotiation back on track. One way is to go back to the negotiation plan, right? And your assessment of their goals and interests and the commonalities that you share. You know, start the negotiations with the issues where you think you're the closest. This can help to build some early wins in the process, to establish rapport, and, you know, hopefully building more of a collaborative environment, but also feeding your confidence and helping to calm them, right? Asking questions is another great, you know, technique to use here, you know, and listen closely and take a break or a regroup if you need to, you know, depending on the circumstances or the power imbalances at play. Sometimes it's helpful to call in reinforcements, right? So to the extent that you're in a facilitated negotiation, you ask the mediator to help navigate the power differential and develop a better communication plan under the circumstances. At the conclusion of the negotiation, it's important to look back and assess what worked and what didn't. So this can help move forward and help you move forward in future negotiations. So thinking about your experience of the negotiation, you know, reflect on things like, what did you expect to happen? Have a relook at your negotiation plan to remind yourself of what you had laid out. And then, reflect on what actually happened. How well did you outline your goals? Were you able to address all of them? How was your assessment of the other person and the likely areas where you thought it would be most or least likely for you to come to an agreement? Were you close, or how was your estimation there? Did you walk away from the discussion satisfied with the outcome, and why or why not? Did this discussion ever go off the rails at any point? And how did you handle it if it did? Are there aspects of the experience that you felt more or less comfortable in? Why is that? Did you uncover any habits or any actions that you maybe wouldn't do again? And what did they do that you thought was effective? Is there a way for you to leverage any of their tactics on a going forward basis? And if you use the mindfulness, if it did come into play during the discussion, what impact did it have? Did you handle the discussion any differently, now that you're sort of aware of this and have it in the back of your mind, or maybe in the front? So in this part of the process, I think it's also important to just remember not to proceed with judgment, right? So this is not intended as an exercise in sort of beating yourself up for missed opportunities or maybe saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. It's a balanced assessment of what felt right to you and what didn't. So see this as an opportunity to sort of learn about yourself, how you can continue to hone your negotiation skills with each negotiation, which is something I think everybody has to do. So here we are at the end. So really, just as a recap, we talked about mindfulness and sort of how it can come into the negotiation, and then various different techniques that you might consider using. But I think that the place to start is on a daily basis, and maybe just picking one part of this, and not necessarily trying it out in a negotiation space, but trying it out in your daily life. So, for example, with me, I think I started with listening. Listening was so hard for me because I tend to get really angry. And so, I would automatically start processing, what am I going to say next? And how did I not know this before? So I started practicing my listening skills at home and with my kid, so that when he's talking to me, I actually would not be on my phone. I would not be cooking or watching TV. Stop what I was doing. I would look into his eyes and we would have a conversation. And the quality of the conversation was much different, and it can be silly things too, in terms of just like active listening is watching Netflix without being on your phone and shopping or, eating or whatever, just watching the show to see if you actually like the damn show and need to watch the next episode instead of just, sort of wandering through it. So there's just lots of little ways that you can start if this is interesting and outside of the negotiation space. But I do think that, I noticed that the quality of the conversation, when you're able to take a step back, recognize the emotions, let them go, and then proceed with the discussion, it goes up tremendously. So that is all I have. And thank you so much